and welcome. This is Science Fiction Snob. Today we're going to talk about The Watchmen, the new HBO series that is, as I record this, has completed 8 episodes with the finale, only the finale left. So we're going to talk about that. Is it worth watching or not? My view is yes, it is, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm also going to look at the controversy surrounding the show a little bit. There's been some complaints from different sectors. I'll go over those near the end and talk about what I think about them. So first of all, The Watchmen is based on the Alan Moore comic book, alternate timeline of Earth, and like I said, it's got all the elements to make a good show. So starting off the acting, it's excellent. Regina King plays Angela Abar. She's great, though I will admit and agree with some people who said that she was a little weak in the 8th episode, where she was all sort of googly eyes for Dr. Manhattan, and it was a little bit lame there. But other than that, her acting is very strong, and when she gets pissed off at Manhattan later in that episode, she plays it great, as well as all the other episodes too. I think she's great. She's a great actor. Jeremy Irons playing old man Ozymandias. To me, he is now Ozymandias. He's great. One of my favorite characters, Tim Blake Nelson playing Looking Glass. I love that character, and the way he plays the character. Other big names: Lou Gossett Jr., Gene Smart playing Agent Blake, or the old Silk Spectre. Some great actors there, and they're doing great jobs. Also, though I haven't seen them yet in this series myself, I'm looking at the cast page. I'll note that there's 2 actors playing mime and marionette. So it looks like we're going to see them. I don't know if we're going to see them the final episode or in the second season, but looking forward to seeing them as well. Those are some great characters from the Doomsday Clock comic, and I'd like to see more of them. So, as I was saying anyway, the acting, excellent. Some of the let's talk a little bit about the production value. Some of these superhero stories I see, the non-HBO stuff, you can tell that they're like, oh, we have to have a conversation between these 2 people. Where we're going to put it, I don't know, just put it wherever. I'll give you a good example. Batwoman, that horrible show. I'm going to maybe do a review on that. So there's this point where Batwoman is talking to Alice, who's the evil person. So they're talking on top of a building right beside the bat signal. So I don't remember them saying where the bat signal is, but I think it's usually on top of a police station, or maybe on top of the head of the crows there, maybe top of his building. This is some secure building in the city. How the hell did Alice get there? Wouldn't that be a big plot point? It's like they have to reuse the set. So where we're going to do this, they have to have a little talky talk. Let's do it there. It's foolish. There's none of that stuff on this HBO show. Every scene is appropriately placed, and it's not this sort of throw it together type of stuff. So you really see, the production value, the work that goes into the scenes. In the first episode, spoilers, they crash Night Owls. Somehow they have Night Owl's ship. Haven't heard how that happened, but they crash it, and it's quite a spectacular crash. They put the money into making sure that it looks good. So now, just to go to the opposite of that point, there were some complaints by some people in episode 8 for the look of Dr. Manhattan, and he's difficult to do. Maybe they cut corners a little bit there. I don't know. I don't think it. I recognize the complaint, but I don't see it took away from the story. So let's go on to the story. I think the story is generally good, but there are some problems and some weird, I personally think weird choices that were made in setting up the story, and I'm going to go over them a little bit next. So, I mean, overall, those the problems don't, they don't take they take away a little bit from the story, but I personally can get around them. I think most people can. The series has a pretty good, around 80% like to dislike ratio. So I think overall it's good. But let's talk about some of the problems. So some of the concerns when the show first came out was the whole, it's not really Watchmen. It's woke. It's not, and in that sense, it's focusing more on, some sort of, not focusing on storytelling. It's focusing on some sort of agenda. So I see a little bit of that. It's a little strange. So let's start with the big part right at the beginning. So the choice of having racism be sort of the key of the story. Now, you can do that. That's fine. But is racism really the biggest? Like, if you're going to try and do a show that doing the X-Men in the the 60s and tying it to the civil rights movement, I mean, that makes sense. Is racism really the biggest problem in the United States right now? Racism is probably at its lowest level in the U.S. than it's ever been. So, why go this way? I mean, I don't remember anything from the original Watchmen movie or comic book which was big on racism. I mean, the themes from that I got from from the original Watchmen was the whole Dr. Manhattan, him losing his humanity, becoming a god, and not caring about human beings. The whole, Rorschach with the black and white, right and wrong, and Ozymandias is more, is it right to, kill 3 million people to save, 7 billion? I mean, that was what Watchmen was about. It wasn't about racism. So I question why they would have to bring that into the show. And then, now, watching the first 8 episodes, and I haven't seen the finale, of course, but and you look at it, and you're thinking back, I mean, the bad guys in the show could have been anybody. Like, they didn't necessarily need to be racists or white supremacists. I mean, the whole, lots of spoilers coming up, but I understand from this point in the show, after the 8th episode, the audience understands the problem to be that the bad guys, the 7th Cavalry, the white supremacists, want to capture Dr. Manhattan and somehow kill him and take his power, and then they would become like Dr. Manhattan, powerful. I mean, I don't know how this is going to work. It seems a little bit wacky, but is that really I mean, sure, it could be a white supremacist sort of thing, and then make the whole world, I don't know, white and erase anybody who's not white. But I mean, it could be any group could have the desire to be a god like Dr. Manhattan. I mean, he's like a living god. I mean, any bad guy would want that power. You could have used anybody as the bad guy. And so I don't understand why that would have to be chosen specifically. You could have chosen anything and it would have fit the story. So the next part I'd like to talk about, and I think this is a very interesting concept, interesting idea, and I'd love to hear people in the comments your thoughts about this. I even question whether the bad guys are actually the bad guys. Now, the other actors in the show tell us constantly that they're bad, but are we really seeing them being bad? I mean, first episode starts out with a black police officer being shot by one of these guys who's wearing, who's a member of this group because he has a Rorschach mask in his car. So now you could say, okay, well, that's proof that he's a racist. But I mean, I think that he didn't shoot the cop because the cop was black. He shot the cop because the cop found out who he was, that he was part of this group, this proscribed group. So if the cop had been white, I don't think that he would have necessarily done anything different. I mean, he might have shot him as well, right? So I don't think that was so much of a racial. It's not clear that it's a racial thing. And the other part is, after at the there's a funeral for the chief who's killed, and one of the 7th Cavalry guys shows up with a bomb, and he's going to blow up the funeral. Well, I mean, there's black people at the funeral too, but there's lots of white people too, and the guy is this seems just like a normal terrorist attack because they didn't like the chief. So it's not necessarily a black or white thing. I mean, that's my view. I don't really see it there. Now, on the other side of the coin, it actually seems that perhaps the 7th Cavalry are, maybe they're not the bad guys. And I'll give you a couple examples. So first of all the time, so the chief is killed, and, right away, Sister Knight, the guy, Luke Gossett Jr. admits to it. He's black, and she hides that, right? So then what do the cops do? The cops assume it's the 7th Cavalry who do it. Now, do they go to find the 7th Cavalry? No, they go to, Nixonville, which is where a bunch of, I guess is supposedly a hotbed of 7th Cavalry support. But it's not like those are all the 7th Cavalry guys there. I'm sure there's innocent women and children living there and all kinds of stuff. They go there and they just roust them out. They start beating on them. They grab people. There's a big fight. They throw them in things and take them to an off-books black site warehouse where they put them through the racism detector, which is just basically asks you questions, and if your pupils dilate when you ask the question, then you're a racist. And then they beat people up and torture them in order to find out information. Does that sound like if anybody was doing that to normal people in America, Americans would consider themselves required to fight back against that, right? Now, you couple that with the fact that, there's a little reference to Second Amendment rights being taken away, and they've been taken away. That's going to piss off a lot of Americans. The government seems to be acting like the tyrant that deserves to be resisted. What's another few examples? Oh, the police, they don't care anything about the people. There's a scene where old Silk Spectre, she gets, sent to go and investigate this murder, and they're having a briefing back in Washington or New York, wherever she's from, and they're having a briefing, and the guy giving the briefing, her boss, is talking. Oh yeah, 7th Cavalry guys. They believe in, and he just sort of stops. Who cares? They're bad. Like he doesn't even care enough to explain what it is that they do. Like they don't care. There's a junior guy who's working the projector, and he puts a slide up, talking about what the 7th Cavalry's views are, and their ideology, all that sort of thing. And he dismisses it, and he's like, "Who put that? Why'd you put? I didn't tell you to put that in there. Don't put that in there." Like he doesn't even care what they think. How do you find out? How do you defeat your enemy unless you know what your enemy's about, right? Like, you have to know that. They don't even care enough to do that. Oh, another scene, Silk Spectre, Agent Blake, she finds the black site by following them, and she comes up, and there's, the cops who are all masked are pulling this guy who's got his head is covered, he's got the burlap sack over his face. They pull him out. And they're, kicking him around. It's like, oh. And she comes walking up, and they're like, oh. They're like, uh-oh. Like, the cops are like, uh-oh, the FBI person caught us, sort of thing. And she says, "Excuse me, sir, you're talking to the guy who's been apprehended. Are your civil rights being violated?" And he goes, yes, they are. And she goes, "I don't give a shit." Like, they don't even care about these people. Like, to me, you see more of the police and those in authority, being evil, doing bad things, than you see 7th Cavalry doing those sort of things, right? Like, it's like, I'm 99% sure this isn't going to happen because of who's making the show. But, the way that the show should go is it should come out and say, hey, it's the 7th Cavalry are actually the heroes. They're the good guys. See, the cops and the FBI and all those people were the bad people all along. They're the ones that are trampling on our rights, and they don't give a crap about us, and they hold us and torture us, even though we haven't done anything wrong. I mean, that's the way the show should go, right? But I mean, I'd fall over if it went like that. That would be a great piece of writing. But and I after episode 6 or 7, where it was a big flashback into the race riots in Oklahoma, and where it's a very, very serious, so I didn't know about this before the show, but a very serious event. I mean, it's obvious what the writers are going for. They're going for this big racism, to push this racism thing. But I mean, that's just from watching the show. You would think that the 7th Cavalry are the oppressed minority, the rebels, fighting against the evil empire of of America, and you could believe that. So as well, I mean, in the end, we find out that one of the episodes we're not even sure that the senator. We aren't even sure if the 7th Cavalry really are the white supremacists that they are. We don't know why the chief was supporting them, and we find out that there's this senator who is, a big supporter of the police from Oklahoma, and yet he's been somehow using the 7th Cavalry to do his bidding and to, build this portal, and we assume that he's behind trying to catch Dr. Manhattan for some reason. So, how is this really about white supremacy and racism? I mean, if the group that is supposedly, the successor to the KKK is really, completely penetrated by, law enforcement, and even, a senator who's using it to do his own, little project. I mean, how racist and white supremacists are they? It harkens back to the 80s in the U.S. where, the KKK and these white supremacist groups were so penetrated by law enforcement that it was kind of, they would do these sort of, they'd have this plan to do something, and it'd be like, well, are they really doing it? I mean, the whole leadership almost is run by informants and people who work for the FBI. So, I mean, who's actually, keeping racism alive in America? Is it normal people, or is it really the FBI keeping it, because they're the ones basically controlling these groups? So, it's kind of a strange, unusual thing to choose for Watchmen, and I understand why people would be upset for this kind of thing. As I said, it doesn't, racism has nothing to do with the original. The way the story is written, it could have been any type of evil group that they could have chosen. It doesn't seem that integral to the story. I mean, they made it a bit integral with Hooded Justice and that sort of thing, but you didn't have to do that. So I kind of question some of the story choices, and I think they could have made it a little less political, a little more palatable to everybody, by just keeping it a little more neutral in that sense, and not, trying to push some sort of, I don't know what they're trying to push with this. But yeah, let's hope that I'm still very interested in the show. I mean, after every episode, I'm like, wow, that was good. The acting is good. I'm always interested to see what's going to happen next. So I am curious as to see how they're going to bring it together in the finale. I understand they already have probably. I mean, it might be a cliffhanger. Who knows? I'm already a little bit interested to see how they're going to resolve these sort of problems, but there's still a lot to resolve. I don't see how they're going to resolve it in one episode. I think it's going to be, they've got a multiple season type storyline going. One other thing I will say negative, I'm not a big fan of the way that the show is edited, in a sense that it's the way it's put together. So you've got the overarching story, but then it's like every episode is kind of a throwback I mean, not every episode, but many of the episodes and many parts of the episodes are throwbacks. So they'll have something happen. You'll go, why the heck is that happening? And then you won't find out till the next episode, or maybe a few episodes later, as to what is going on. Some of the scenes with Ozymandias is a good example. You're like, what the hell's going on? What's he doing? And then you don't find out till a few episodes later that, why, where he is, and what's he's doing, and sort of the crazy things that he's doing. The Dr. Manhattan episode is an example too. You see Angela Abar reveal Dr. Manhattan, and then you're like, okay. And then the next episode shows how they met and got together and all that stuff, and how he got to where he is. So it's this sort of flashback way of writing, as opposed to just a sort of a general story going forward. And I'm not as big a fan of that. I can see why they did it. It keeps interest, and it keeps you wanting to stay from episode to episode. I'm wondering if they're going to stick with that the whole thing, or I'm curious as to why they chose to do that as well. But anyway, so that's my summary of Watchmen. This Sunday, the finale, we'll see what happens there. Again, even with the problems, I think the story is good. The acting is great. I think it's worth your time to watch it, and try to work yourself around some of the negative story elements, which would have been better if they were changed. But I don't think they don't destroy the work. All right. So thanks. Comments in below. I love to hear what you think of the show, and the theme and the racism. Is the 7th Cavalry actually the good guys? We'll see. And we'll see you next time.